Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks.
My daughter-in-law promised to take care of me, but after the crash, she left me bleeding in shattered glass and drove away. My name is Margaret Caldwell. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm 70 years old. Let me tell you something right now. Blood may be thicker than water, but lies are thicker than both. Because the worst wounds? They don't come from strangers. They come from the people you trusted with everything. They come from family. They come when you're bleeding on the side of the road, and someone you called your daughter looks you in the eye, and drives away like you're nothing. It started like this. You always think you're the victim, don't you, Margaret? She snapped, slamming the car door so hard I thought the window might crack. And you always think you're some kind of saint, don't you, Denise? I barked back, heart pounding. Well, guess what? Saints don't siphon money from their in-laws and lie about it. The air inside the car was thick, humid with hate. The windows fogged up not from the weather, but from the rage that passed between us like fire and gasoline. We weren't just arguing. We were exploding. Her fingers were clenched on the steering wheel, knuckles white, jaw grinding as she turned toward me with eyes so full of contempt I almost recoiled. You think you're so clever, don't you? Always watching. Always judging. I gave up my life to take care of you. You gave up nothing. I spat. You came for the inheritance, and when that wasn't enough, you started draining my son's accounts behind his back. You old witch. The tires screeched as she floored the gas. My shoulder slammed into the passenger door as the car lurched forward. Denise, stop the car. I shouted, yanking at the seatbelt. But she didn't. She kept driving, like a woman possessed, veering down the mountain road at a speed no sane person would ever take. Branches whipped past the windshield. The curves got sharper. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the engine. I gave you everything, I choked out. My home. My name. My family. You swore to my dying son you'd take care of me. And I did, she shrieked. Until you started sticking your nose where it didn't belong. I turned toward her, trembling. You almost got caught, didn't you? That's why you're doing this. You'd rather kill me than let me speak. She didn't answer. Instead, she yanked the wheel. And then. Metal. Screaming. Glass. The world turned sideways. And I remember it vividly, the moment everything went black. The crunch of bone. The sound of my ribs snapping. The smell of gasoline. And then the cold. I woke up to shattered silence. Blood in my mouth. Something sharp in my leg. The world was sideways, broken, still. The car had hit a ditch, flipped over, and the windshield had exploded like sugar glass. And there, through the blur of red and smoke, I saw her. Denise. Crawling out of the wreck, coughing, groaning. And then. She looked at me. She looked right at me. And do you know what she did? She ran. She got up. Looked at me bleeding. And ran. Not to help. Not to call 911. Not even to scream for someone nearby. She limped toward the road, looking both ways like a criminal in the dark, then disappeared into the trees. I wasn't just left behind. I was left for dead. So here's the moral, plain and simple. Sometimes the people who promise to care for you are just waiting for you to become helpless, so they can get rid of you without anyone noticing. And the worst part is, no one would have believed me if I hadn't survived. But I did. And I'm going to tell you everything. So don't look away. Don't scroll past. Because what happened next changed everything. Not just for me. But for her. And for everyone who thought I was just some old lady taking up space. This is the story of how I was left to die by the woman I once called my daughter-in-law. And how I got back up. You want to know what real betrayal looks like? Keep watching. If you believe no one deserves to be discarded like trash. If you know what it's like to be used, lied to, and left behind. Then don't just sit there. Share this story. Tag someone who needs to hear it. Because justice? Sometimes it starts with a story. I don't remember the ambulance. I don't remember the sirens or the voices. But I remember waking up, barely, under harsh white lights, a tube down my throat, and a sharp pain in my ribs that made it feel like every breath came with a knife. What I do remember is her voice. Sweet. Too sweet. Like syrup over poison. Oh, thank God she's awake, Denise said, rushing to my side like a devoted daughter. I've been so worried. She was in a clean shirt. No blood. No limp. Not a scratch on her that showed what really happened. And she was crying. Crying for the nurses. Crying for the doctors. Crying for the cameras, if anyone had been filming. But not for me. I couldn't speak yet, my throat too raw, my body too broken, but my eyes locked on hers. And I swear to you, she flinched. Because she knew I remembered. And I knew what she was doing. Her memory may be affected, I heard her say sweetly to a nurse. Head trauma can do that, right? She might confuse things. I just don't want her blaming herself for the crash. Blaming myself? She was already spinning the story. Twisting it. Preparing the world for her version of events. The version where I was just a confused old woman who probably grabbed the wheel or had a senior moment. I couldn't move my body. But my mind? My mind was on fire. And just when I thought I was completely alone in that hospital bed, drowning in Denise's lies, God sent me a witness. Her name was Nurse Laney. Late 30s. Sharp eyes. No nonsense. The kind of woman who's seen enough pain to know when something doesn't add up. She came in on her second shift after my surgery, glanced over her shoulder, and whispered while checking my vitals. You weren't alone in that crash, were you? I blinked. She said you were driving. But you've got glass embedded in your right side, steering wheel injury would be left. Her story's wrong. And she was way too eager to shut me out when I came in that night. I tried to nod. It hurt. But I looked her dead in the eye. And she understood. She left you there, didn't she? Laney whispered. I blinked again, this time, slow. Deliberate. Her whole face changed. Let me tell you something about women like Laney. They may wear scrubs, but they carry armor. And in that moment, she went from nurse to soldier. I've seen her before, she muttered. She's the one always asking about insurance. Always hovering when we mention the estate forms. Don't worry, Miss Caldwell. You're not crazy. And I don't like liars. I wanted to cry. Not from pain. From relief. Because finally, someone believed me. The next day, Denise came again. Dressed like a grieving saint. With flowers, of course. Cheap ones, already wilting. She leaned over my bed and whispered in a voice full of ice and sugar. I know you're awake now. I saw you blink for that nurse. You better keep quiet, Margaret. You want to spend your final days in a home? Or worse, court? Because you will lose. I stared at her. My face calm. My heart not. And that's when I realized something. She wasn't scared of what she'd done. She was scared of what I'd say. Because somewhere beneath that polished exterior, Denise knew. If the truth came out, the money, the house, the legacy, everything, would be gone. And she would be left with nothing. What she didn't know? I had a plan. But I had to be smart. And I had to stay alive long enough to finish it. They released me from the hospital 2 weeks later. My ribs were still cracked, my hip bruised, and the painkillers barely dulled the storm in my bones. But I didn't ask for more time. I didn't beg for a rehab center. I asked to go home. Because I wasn't healing in that hospital bed. Not really. I was plotting. Denise tried to fake concern when she wheeled me inside. Be careful with the step, Margaret. Let me help. I almost laughed. She was the one who put me in this chair. But I played along. I pretended to forget. I pretended to forgive. I pretended to be grateful she brought me home instead of shipping me off to a nursing facility like she threatened. But what Denise didn't know was that before the crash, I'd already started watching her. You see, this wasn't the first time I'd felt her fangs through that sweet voice. She'd always been clever. Charming. The kind of woman who makes you doubt your own instincts, until it's too late. But a few months before the crash, I noticed little things missing. My wedding band from the top drawer. A few old coins from my husband's safe. Receipts in my son's name, for purchases he never made. So one quiet afternoon, while she was at the gym, I had a tech guy from church come by. He helped me install a tiny camera inside the living room smoke detector. Just one. Facing the couch. Just enough to catch the things she thought no one could see. I'd never told anyone about it. Not even my son. And after the crash, after she left me for dead, I remembered that camera like it was a weapon hidden under the floorboards. So the very next morning I was home, I asked Denise, weakly, to bring me my knitting bag from the upstairs hall closet. She scoffed but left. I waited until her steps disappeared. Then I rolled myself to the living room shelf, reached behind the old photo albums, and pulled out the tiny black memory card I'd stashed there just days before the accident. And what was on it? Proof. Not of the crash, not yet. But of something even better. Her confession. 2 weeks before the wreck, she was pacing in front of the fireplace. I was supposedly asleep upstairs. But the camera saw her. Heard her. She was on the phone with someone. I'll never forget what she said. Once the old bat's in a home, I can finally sell this place. And the will's airtight. She put me down as her power of attorney last year. Stupid woman still thinks I care. I sat frozen in that chair, the tablet in my lap shaking in my hands. She had planned it. Even before the crash. She wanted me out of the picture. Not just physically, but legally. And that meant only one thing. There had to be something in the will she was hiding. That afternoon, I asked Nurse Laney, off duty but visiting, to help me make a call to my old attorney. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Denise had insisted on using a family lawyer she trusted instead. That was her mistake. Because my original attorney still had my first will on file. The real one. The one that named my grandson, my actual blood, as the executor. Not Denise. And when I told him what I'd been through, he went quiet. Then he asked one question. Margaret, did you ever sign anything else after your son passed? My blood went cold. Because I had. Months ago, Denise had shown up with papers. Said it was for insurance. Just routine, she'd smiled. I hadn't read them. I was grieving. I trusted her. But now? Now I knew what I'd signed. Power. I'd signed away power. The next part of my plan was dangerous. But I didn't have a choice. So I waited. Waited until Denise was gone on one of her self-care weekends, nails, brunch, probably a few secret meetings with estate agents behind my back. Then I had Laney wheel me into the upstairs study. I opened the desk drawer Denise never let me near. And what I found? A forged will. My signature, copied. Dated just 2 months after my son's funeral. Every asset to her name. Every clause favoring her. There it was. Cold. Legal. Sealed. And I smiled. Because she thought it was her victory. But now, it would be her undoing. You ever notice how a liar gets bolder the closer they think they are to winning? They smile more. Walk taller. They stop being careful. Because in their head, they've already won. That was Denise. 2 weeks after I came home from the hospital, she started wearing silk robes around the house. The expensive kind. The kind I know she couldn't afford on a nurse's salary and a half-empty joint account. She started redecorating. Moved my wedding photo to the garage. Brought in catalog furniture and started calling the living room her space. And me? I kept quiet. Smiled when she brought me lukewarm tea. Said thank you when she dropped off the wrong meds and never came back to check if I'd taken them. Because I wasn't playing her game anymore. I was playing my own. And it started with a flash drive. Nurse Lainey helped me upload the footage from the hidden camera, the audio of Denise's confession, the timestamp, her face, her voice. We also scanned the forged will. Everything neatly packed into a folder named Truth. We sent it to my real lawyer, Mr. Claiborne. 3 hours later, he called me. And I'll never forget his words. Margaret, we have enough to bury her in court. But if you want real justice, not just a court case, let her speak first. Let her prove her greed. And that's when I knew. We had to trap her. On record. In her own words. So I asked Claiborne to request a casual, home visit. Nothing formal. Just a routine wellness check on his elderly client. Denise would never suspect a thing. He scheduled it for Friday. And Denise? She had no idea she was walking into a setup. That Friday morning, she strutted into my room with her usual fake smile energy. You look pale today, Margaret. Maybe rest instead of talking so much. I nodded. Weakly. Then said something that made her freeze. I got a call. From Claiborne. Said he's coming by. Denise's smile twitched. Claiborne? The old lawyer? Why? Just a check-in. He said something about reviewing my estate. I told him you'd be here. There was a flicker of panic behind her eyes. Then, just like I'd predicted, she snapped back into her performance. Oh. Right. Of course. We're overdue for an update. I'm sure he'll want to see that everything's in order. She rushed to her room 10 minutes later and I could hear papers shuffling, drawers opening, zippers being zipped. She was preparing her version of the truth. Fake papers. New lies. Exactly what I needed her to do. At 11:04 a.m., the doorbell rang. Denise answered with the poise of a woman giving a house tour. Oh, Mr. Claiborne. Please come in. Margaret's just resting in the sitting room. She was so busy pretending, she didn't notice the tiny recorder he'd placed inside his coat pocket. Or the fact that Lainey was already in the kitchen, phone recording in hand. It was time. Claiborne sat across from her in the living room. I stayed silent in my chair, wrapped in a blanket, eyes low. Just wanted to clarify a few things, he said smoothly, taking out a pen and notebook. Mind walking me through the estate changes again? The most recent ones? Denise didn't miss a beat. Oh yes, of course. Margaret signed over her power of attorney to me last year. Everything's updated. The house, the accounts, it's all under my management. For her benefit, of course. And when was that signed? Right after her son passed. She was devastated. I took care of the paperwork while she focused on grieving. So she didn't review it herself? No, she said quickly. She trusted me. Claiborne glanced up. And the will? Oh, the most recent one's in my office. I keep everything organized. She gave me full authority. I mean, she said she had no one else. That was it. That was the sentence I needed. Because I wasn't dead. And I wasn't helpless. I looked up and said, loud and clear, "I never gave you full authority." She whipped around. What? I sat up straighter. The blanket dropped from my lap. "You lied," I said. "Calm, steady. You forged that will. You left me in a car wreck. You took everything from me." Denise's eyes went wide. You don't know what you're talking about." Claiborne pulled out the folder. Lainey stepped out of the kitchen. And for the first time since my son's funeral, Denise looked scared. We showed her everything. The footage. The forgery. The audio. She tried to deny it, sputtering excuses about confusion and grief, but the evidence was clear. And when Claiborne stood up and calmly said, "We'll be filing fraud and attempted elder abuse charges on Monday," she broke. "You can't do this. This house is mine." She said I could have it. "No," I said, rising to my feet, pain in my ribs be damned. "What I said was that family takes care of each other. And all you did was try to get rid of me. Some people think justice ends with handcuffs. That once the sirens fade and the police drive off, the pain dissolves too. But that's not how it works. Justice doesn't erase betrayal. It just proves it happened." Denise was arrested the following Monday. Detective Ross came with 2 officers, walked her out of the house in broad daylight, and let the neighbors watch as she screamed and cried and begged them to believe her story. "That old woman is confused. She's lying. That footage is fake. She fought like a wild animal in designer boots. But the evidence spoke louder than her tantrum. Fraud. Forgery. Abuse of a vulnerable adult. Reckless endangerment. Attempted murder wasn't filed. There wasn't enough to prove intent on the crash, but everyone knew. Even if it wasn't said out loud. When the door slammed shut behind her, and I finally heard silence, I broke. I sobbed in my chair. Hands shaking. Not because she was gone, but because for the first time in years, I could finally breathe in my own home. But here's what they don't tell you after the arrest. The loneliness gets louder. The days felt strange without Denise's heels clicking through the hallway. The silence didn't comfort me, it haunted me. Because as twisted as it sounds, you get used to being watched. Controlled. Even abused. There were days I sat at the window wondering if I'd done the right thing. If maybe I should have just let it go. If maybe, the house wasn't worth all this mess. But then Lainey came over with a letter in her hand. A real one. Postmarked. From my grandson. "Dear Grandma," it said. "I'm sorry I haven't written sooner. Denise always said you weren't feeling well. That it was better if I didn't visit. But now I know the truth. Mr. Claiborne reached out to me. He told me everything. I'm flying down next week. And I don't care if I have to sleep on the floor, I just want to see you again. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for speaking up. I love you." I held that letter like it was life itself. Because it reminded me of something I'd nearly forgotten. I wasn't alone. Denise had tried to erase everyone, one by one. But blood remembers. Love remembers. And now it was time to put my life back together. The next month was full of court dates and paperwork. Denise pleaded not guilty. Of course. Tried to spin some story about protecting me from myself. But the documents, the recordings, the forged signatures, they spoke louder. Mr. Claiborne was brilliant in court. Calm, sharp, unshakable. And when it came time for me to testify, I stood. On my own feet. Braced with a cane. Looked that jury in the eye. And I said. I gave my daughter-in-law everything. My trust. My home. My love. And she left me to die in a ditch because I was no longer useful to her. But I'm still here. And I am not done speaking. They found her guilty. 3 years. Maybe not enough, in your eyes. But it wasn't just the prison time that mattered. It was that she didn't get the house. She didn't get my silence. And she didn't get the last word. I did. I rebuilt slowly. My grandson moved in for a while. Helped me repaint the walls. Took down the fake family portraits Denise had put up and replaced them with real ones. Me, my son, my husband when we were young. Lainey visited every week. We drank sweet tea on the porch and talked about her garden. And one morning, I mailed something back to Claiborne. The memory card. Keep this in your files, I wrote. Not just for me. For the next person who needs proof before anyone believes them. Because that's the thing about people like Denise. They don't always come with horns and red flags. They come with smiles. They come with promises. They come calling you family. But now? I know how to recognize them. And I know how to fight back. People assume the worst part of being 70 is the pain. The backaches. The pills. The sleepless nights. They're wrong. The worst part is being ignored when you're right, and remembered only when you're gone. Denise never expected me to survive that crash. She didn't just leave me to bleed in shattered glass. She planned to tell the world I died peacefully under her care. That I went quietly. Gratefully. She'd have cried on cue at my memorial. Worn black. Said a few pretty words. Then taken everything I built, everything I earned, and stamped her name on it. But I ruined that story by waking up. And I ruined her plans by remembering. Because when you live long enough, you learn the most dangerous people aren't the ones who yell. They're the ones who smile while cutting you open. I still have trouble sleeping sometimes. I'll be honest, I flinch at the sound of high heels on tile floors. I keep the bedroom door locked now, even during the day. And I'll never look at the smoke detector in the living room the same again. But there's peace in the silence now. Because I earned it. Lainey tells me I should go on a trip. Maybe visit my sister in Oregon. See something new. My grandson says I should write a book. But I just want to plant flowers. Lilies. My favorite. Not because they're pretty. But because they bloom back stronger every time they're cut down. They're stubborn. They're soft, but unkillable. Just like me. The hardest part in all of this? Wasn't the crash. Wasn't the trial. Wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing how quickly people will rewrite your story once you're silent. Denise thought I was too old to fight. Too broken to speak. Too weak to stand up and say. No. That's not what happened. You don't get to tell my story. I will tell it myself. And I did. But this story I'm telling now? It's not just for me. It's for every mother, grandmother, widow, and woman who's ever been shoved aside. Because someone younger thought they could rewrite history. It's for anyone who's ever been lied about while they couldn't speak. You have more power than they think. More strength than they know. And more time than they hoped. You know what Denise hated most? That I never cursed her name in court. I never screamed. I never made a scene. I just looked her in the eye, and told the truth. Because people like her? They feed off chaos. They expect you to break down so they can say, see? She's unstable. She's losing it. But calm truth? Truth told without trembling? That's the sharpest knife. She wrote me a letter from prison. 2 pages long. Apologies. Excuses. Half memories about her rough childhood. Promises to do better. Hints that maybe, someday, I'd give her a second chance. I burned it. Not because I hate her. Because I forgave her. But forgiving her didn't mean I wanted her voice in my house again. It didn't mean I wanted to see her face on my doorstep. It just meant I wasn't going to carry her anymore. I'd already carried enough. Now, it was time to live again. So, here I am. 70. Alive. Broken bones healed. Bruises faded. But scars? I keep those. They remind me I survived. People ask me what I learned. Here's my answer. Never hand your life to someone just because they smile. Never stay silent just because they call you family. And never underestimate the power of a woman who remembers everything. Because I was supposed to fade away. To be a quiet story in the back of Denise's version of the world. But instead, I outlived her lie. And I made sure the truth stayed louder.